It's that time again, Our Town Live, where friends, family, people you know, and others you'd rather not know share with us their unique bits of wisdom. And now, here's Herb, your host, for another show.
Today we feature Kevin Coolidge, the author of 11 children's books and one fantastical adventure novella for adults, noted for his nationally acclaimed The Totally Ninja Raccoons. These writings are a series of children's books targeting 1st through 4th graders. The books are especially structured to encourage reluctant readers. Short chapters, humor, adventure, and one picture per chapter keep kids feeling a sense of engagement and accomplishment as they plow through these stories and ask for more. He's recently become an honorary member of the Cat Board. When he's not scooping the litter box, taking out the garbage, or feeding Gypsy her tuna, he's writing more stories about the Totally Ninja Raccoons. All books take place in Pennsylvania, making it a great regional selection for kids to learn about their region. These books become something special then that buyers won't find at every other store or scholastic book fair. He's the owner of a family bookstore, My Shelf Books and Gifts, 7 East Melrose in Pennsylvania. You can follow the Totally Ninja Raccoons on Facebook and on www.wellsborobookstore.com. So without further ado, here's Kevin. Kevin Coolidge.
Yes.
Author of 12 children's books and the creator of the Totally Ninja Raccoons, correct?
That's correct.
What is the Totally Ninja Raccoons?
The Totally Ninja Raccoons is a children's series for reluctant readers that I wrote. It's about 3 raccoon brothers who decide to become ninjas because they already have the mask. So sometimes you just have to work with your strengths. It's an early reader series. Reading level is about 2nd to 4th grade, though I do have younger and older readers. But that's the reading level is right around the 2nd to 4th grade. And there are 8 books in that series. Each one has a cryptid or a creature of folklore or myth.
What do you think is the best book that you've written?
Always hard to answer because it's kind of like picking your favorite child. There's something I like about each book, but picking the best one that I've written, it's pretty hard to do, especially when I have like 12 children's books and 1 adult novella, so I have 13 books out, so that's pretty hard to choose just one right now.
Over the years, in the responses of your books, what have been the most satisfying responses you've gotten? And the other question is, what has been the most disappointing?
The responses I got that were the most satisfying is when I find that children love to read them. So, for example, I get fan mail. I've gotten fan mail on the Ninja Raccoons. That's especially in this day and age where so much of our communication is electronic, to actually get a piece of mail delivered by the post office, written by a child, how they love your books and want to read more. I think that makes it all worth it.
What's been the most disappointing feedback you've gotten?
The most disappointing isn't that disappointing. It's sometimes, there's so many different books. Sometimes a child will pick one of my books, and it's not quite their thing, and that's a little disappointing. But it's not really. Every author wants their book to be loved, but sometimes it's just not the right choice, and that's okay too.
Do you know how many books in total that you have produced and have disseminated?
I've published 13 books. Because there's some books I have half written or I've written, and it's a good idea, but it might be too niche, so sometimes it's not the right time for a book.
Since we have a lot of budding authors nowadays, probably because of the blog and media, what lesson do you think is the most important for a new author to learn, and why?
Well, I'm going to pass on what I feel is the most useful advice that I received from another author is the most important advice I have, and this is something that I think applies to creatives in many fields, is just finish it. Like I have, there's a lot of books that, and even now I have, for every book that I do finish, I have a half-written project. But, it's go ahead and finish that book. I mean, the ideal is great, but I also say that the ideal is the easy part. And that's not always, meaning it's not always easy, but it takes a lot of time and dedication to sit down and write a book. And your first draft, you're probably not going to like it. I don't know any writer that finishes their first draft that actually likes it. In fact, I never show anybody my first draft. The only person that ever sees my first draft is me. I never let my editor or my wife or a friend or anybody who I'm going to use as a test reader, they always get at least the second draft before I even let anybody else read it, because I'll do my first draft and I'm like, oh, that sucks. And it's like, it's not necessarily true, but you can't revise something that you don't have. You can't work on something that you don't have. So it's whether it's that book or whether it's that painting, put some paint on there. I mean, you can't create anything on a blank canvas, whether that's a true actual canvas or whether that canvas is your sheet of paper of your book.
Do you computer type? Do you write? How do you produce your books?
I do a little bit of everything, because I'm old school. I turned 50 this year, so when I started, I did this like most writers of that era. Is like I would write down on a piece of paper. I do most of my stuff on the computer now, but if I'm somewhere where I don't have a computer, or sometimes I'll do some of my children's books, I'll sometimes sketch out or write on paper. So I use and I'll use those as ideals or very rough drafts, and then I do another draft. So I kind of do a little bit of everything, whatever seems right at the moment.
Interesting. What is the factor that you feel has most contributed to your success as an author?
I think what's contributed to me most as a success as an author is knowing my audience. That's another thing, is when you write, it's best to have an audience in mind. Now, that audience might be different than what you think. That sometimes happens, and you can always refine that. But I've worked in the bookstore for over 13 years. So these books have come from my interaction with other readers. It's come from being a big reader myself. Pretty much another piece of advice that almost every writer will give you is that if you want to write, is to write, but it's also to be a reader. And that is very important, because there's so many types of books out there. It's best to, like, if you wanted to write a children's book, there's a lot of people who say, oh, I could write a children's book. And I feel that everybody has a book in them, but maybe your book isn't meant to be a children's book, meaning that you should read a lot of that books that around what you're planning on writing. You should test it on an audience. So, for example, a lot of my books were very natural. They flowed very easily because they came out of ideals I already had and had tested on audiences, either orally, like my first book, which is Hobo Finds a Home, which is how my first cat come to live with me. This was the story I would tell orally my nieces and nephews of how my cat come to live with me. So when I sat down to write the book, it flowed very natural. And so that is, I feel that is very helpful.
You mentioned a bookstore that you work at. Is that your bookstore? Do you work for somebody? What?
It's the bookstore I own with my wife. So I am part owner of From My Shelf Books and Gifts in Wellsboro, Pennsylvania. And I opened that with my wife 13 years ago here in Wellsboro. And it's a small independent bookstore. And so I've been working there for at least 50 hours a week for the last 13 years.
Do you have a website? Do you sell books on the web?
We do. We do a lot out of the store, but of course in this information age, it's very important to have a presence on the internet. So our website is very easy to remember. It's wellsborobookstore.com, and we have a bookstore interested, and I have my author page on there, so you can find out a little bit about me and some of our staff picks. And you can order, if it's out there, you can order. There's a search bar on there. We ship 6 days a week.
Great, really. Let me ask you, when was the hardest of all times in your authoring life during your startup journey, and why and who helped you with it?
My hardest part was when my father passed. I was that hit me pretty hard, even though it was expected, because even if you expect it, it doesn't make it easy. And I was writing a children's book at the time, and I was writing one of the Ninja Raccoons. I was writing Totally Ninja Raccoons Meet the Jersey Devil, and I didn't really want to write. It was because I find that, especially with children's books, one of the hardest part of writing a children's book is that you need to think a little bit like a child when you do that. What a child thinks is funny, and some of what you are feeling can come through with that. And I was pretty sad. So that was the hardest part, one of the hardest part of writing. And what I did is I wrote my father's obituary, which was probably the hardest thing I ever wrote, and that helped me move on. I mean, it's you don't ever actually get over a person's death. It just becomes easier, and sometimes it just took some time to do it all. So I just got back writing again, and I finished it. Sometimes that's what you have to do, is just you finish that piece of work, and you can always come back and work on it and polish it and change it.
What do you consider your biggest literary success?
I think my biggest literary success is probably my first book, Hobo Finds a Home. It's the one that has been the most popular. It was actually picked up by a small publisher when we first did it. That book is now in its second or third printing. When we first started it, we had this. When we started the bookstore, we were very small. I mean, we're not a big bookstore now by any means, but we're probably, to give you an idea, we're probably about 1,300 square feet right now. When we started off in this little basement on our main street in this little town, a dark basement. We only had maybe 700 square feet, and I came out with Hobo Finds a Home. And our hometown has, to give you an idea, has about 2,000 people in it. Now, it's a tourist town, so we have more people come through, and it is the county seat. But I did that little book, and we sold like 700 or 800 copies out of that little basement.
Wow.
And which I didn't know at the time, but that's pretty impressive for a startup book. That I self-published Hobo Finds a Home, and it was, and a small press was interested, and they actually picked it up. And they changed, of course, they wanted to put their own spin on it, so they kept the story, but they put their own, they had their own illustrators, so they changed the illustrations. And the illustrations were great, but they didn't capture what I thought were the essence of the book. And because Hobo Finds a Home is done in a very childlike manner, and that was my intention. And so I had to take, when the new company, the new publisher picked up Hobo, I had to put the old one out of print. I had to take it out of circulation. But before that, I still had several hobos in stock, and I would put them, next to each other, and people preferred the old hobo, and because it's just the way it's very childlike, it's very, very child friendly. Then what happened is that company, as sometimes happens, it went out of business. So the rights went back to me. So I brought the old hobo back into print with the same illustrations. I revised the back cover. Because Hobo at that time had passed. By the time I did that, had passed away. He lived to be about 13.
Mm-hmm.
He passed away, so I updated the back copy a little bit to kind of tribute to Hobo, and that is still one of my bestsellers. I'll do an author event, and kids are just drawn to that.
Right.
They love it. Adults love it. I mean, most of the adults that love it are, cat lovers. So it's one of those that not every book is for every person, but if you're a cat lover, chances are you're going to love Hobo Finds a Home.
If you needed to start all over again,